Hey, what are you doing? Don't come near me. If you come any closer, I'll scream. Scream freely and see if anyone comes to help you. You won't listen to me speaking softly, but you want me to use my fists? Come here with your dad. I'll buy you a necklace tomorrow morning. If your mom can't please you, then you please me. Come here, child. Get out, you bastard. You're my mother's husband. I don't need anything from you. Leave me alone. Despite my painful pleas, he still came closer and tried to control me. I cried until I was burning, hoping that he would stop, hoping that he would be afraid and not want Lily to steal his wife's child, and hoping that someone would hear and save me, but probably not. In the middle of this desolate hill, who could be there? I am Lily, an 18-year-old girl, the age of innocence, the age of enjoying and feeling the beauty of life. But I am not so lucky. Every day, every hour, I still have to endure pain, humiliation, and loss that perhaps no one in this world has to experience. Like many other children, I was born into a farming family and grew up in a new economic zone. My family was originally from Alaska. When I was 12 years old, my family moved to Arizona. My parents had two children, including a younger brother. Just 2 years after moving to the South, my father fell ill and passed away. That was the most difficult period for my family. Losing my father, losing a pillar, all the money was spent on treating my father. The row of houses we lived in had to be mortgaged to pay for medical expenses. When my father passed away, the place where my mother and I lived was gone. My whole family had to ask to stay in a warehouse on a rubber plantation. My mother's main job was to tap rubber and do odd jobs around the commune. My mother met him during her afternoon market visits. He is also my current stepfather. When he married my mother, he was 48 years old, and my mother was 39. His main job was to supply poultry and sell breeding cows to the areas around where I lived. With his sweet talk, he won my mother over within 2 months. To be fair, my mother came to him not because of love, nor because of material things, but because of my sister and I. She didn't want us to live in misery, to be miserable, to have a lack of food, and to endure the contemptuous looks of our friends. She accepted the things she didn't want so that we could have a roof over our heads like other children, to sleep peacefully when it rained, and not to be afraid when strangers came. He had been living alone in this house for 3 or 4 years. For some unknown reason, Lilia Tay and her husband, along with their two sons, followed their mother down to Dinquan to live, leaving him alone here. He and my mother got together with the witness of the neighbors and a proper marriage certificate. They had also agreed not to have children and to accept raising my sister and me. It may not sound right, but to be honest, he wanted to marry my mother so that he would have a place to rely on in his old age. Living alone in a deserted place where there was only one household 2 kilometers away was also a concern. At first, my sister and I both called him Dad in a loving and respectful way. We had a peaceful life that lasted for more than 2 years. Then everything changed, and from here my life turned to a new page, a black page, full of humiliation. After a routine medical examination in the province, my mother discovered that she had uterine fibroids, so she had to be treated and especially abstain from sex. Although he was old, he was very good at it. Whenever he wanted something and my mother did not indulge him, the next day I would immediately see his lewd and despicable face. Every time I saw me, I could not stand it, and it was because of this time that he began to change. He became irritable, always looking for trouble with my mother and me. Many times he cursed for no reason, finding every reason to criticize my mother. My mother knew her place. Her own circumstances did not allow it, so she endured it. His lust was always burning inside him, and those scary eyes began to notice me, and I myself gradually realized his dirty intentions. Although I was an 18-year-old girl, I had suffered a lot, so I was more mature than my peers. Not to praise myself, but because I inherited my father's genes, I was quite beautiful, with the plump figure of an 18-year-old girl, so maybe he noticed me and had evil intentions. During this time, I dropped out of school because my mother was not in good health. I had to help my mother with housework, and also waited for me to be old enough to go to Arkansas to work for a company. I began to notice his gestures. He often stole glances at me, and he especially turned his face away clearly. He no longer cursed me, no longer felt uncomfortable or cursed me as freeloader. He was unusually gentle and considerate towards me. He found every excuse to touch my body, sometimes my back, sometimes my head, sometimes my thighs. He showed a lot of affection, but his soulless eyes could not hide the desire that was rising inside him. He often invited me to go to work with him, but I had to go. Every time I sat behind him on the motorbike, he would touch my thigh, pulling me close to him. He was a beast at my age, and in the situation of being dependent on him, I could not be reckless and strongly resist. He became more and more encroaching. He often stared at my butt and bust, but his gaze was so greedy that it was disgusting. The house was in the mountains. Living conditions were limited. The bedrooms were only separated by old curtains. The bathroom was made of rotten pine wood. Every time I went to take a bath, he would hang around, his eyes scrutinizing every gap. One time I was changing clothes in the house when he walked in. He stood there calmly looking at my entire body. I was startled and shouted loudly, but he said, "You told me to get some rags." I was really scared and angry, but I couldn't do anything. I didn't dare tell my mother because I was afraid she would be sad. I was already sick and weak, but still had to go to work. And knowing that my stepfather often scrutinized his daughter, my mother probably couldn't stand it. Early one February day in my neighborhood, every month the Farmers Association rented a car to organize a medical examination, and each time it took 2 days to return. My younger brother was studying in a boarding school in the district, and at home there was only me and the old man. To be honest, I never thought he wanted Lily to take advantage of me, nor could I imagine him wanting to sleep with his wife's stepdaughter. The furthest I thought was that he would just stop at looking at me, or just touch my body. But no, I was wrong. It turned out that he had always been thinking about Lily, trying to take me away. I had heard many stories in the newspapers about stepfathers sleeping with their daughters, or stepfathers raping their wives' children, but I never thought I would be involved in that. The morning my mother left for California, I was chopping grass to feed the cows when the old man slowly and quietly came from behind. Seeing him sneaking into my sensitive areas, I was startled and panicked, throwing up the whole pile of grass. "What are you doing? Why are you doing such a depraved thing? Go away. If you do anything to me, I'll tell my mother." I was so scared that I lost all my blood. My legs were unsteady and my hands were shaking so much that I couldn't even hold the knife. "Come here. Let me hug you." "I love you. Come here. I love you. This afternoon I'll deliver goods to the district and I'll buy you some cosmetics. Get lost. Stay away from me." "I don't need anything from you. Don't come near me." Despite my pleas and my fierce attitude, he did not give up his evil intentions. He quickly walked towards me. He hugged me tightly, pressing me tightly against him. His hands squeezed my body hard. I fought back madly and bit his hand hard. When he let go because of the pain, I ran straight into the rubber forest. As I ran, I cried. I was very scared. I had never been so scared. My mind was in panic. I stopped in the middle of a vast rubber forest and sat down. I cried until I had no more tears. I felt wronged. I felt humiliated. I had never hated my uncle like this. At that moment, I knew how fiercely he wanted to rape me. I really had nowhere to go, nowhere to return to except the old man's house. I wanted to call my mother, but I couldn't. I was afraid that she would be sad and get sicker. I consoled myself, restrained my fear because I had to return to that house. I sat alone in the rubber garden until almost afternoon when I returned. When I got home, I couldn't see the old man anywhere. I was timid with every step, every gesture. I was haunted by his every action. While I was fumbling around the room looking for things to take a bath, he came back from somewhere. His voice was gentle as if nothing had happened. "3 portions of rice are in the kitchen. Come in and eat, or you'll be hungry." That sentence made me freeze for a moment. Why had he become so kind? Wasn't he just harassing me this morning? Or had he thought about it and regretted it? Although I wasn't sure if his attitude was real or not, I felt more secure, less worried anyway. He no longer had that intention. So I took a shower and ate dinner, preparing for tomorrow's work. Although everything seemed to be returning to normal, I still kept myself on guard. I closely monitored his every move. In the evenings when my mother was home, I would usually sleep late. But today she was away, so I went to bed early. He was lying in the living room watching TV. While I was lying there, thinking about his actions this morning, the lights in the room began to turn off. I felt something was wrong. It was only 8 o'clock. Why did he turn off the lights? Normally, he turned them off at 10 o'clock. I began to worry and think of bad things. I was tiptoeing to see what was going on when he entered my room. Before I could react, he hugged me. By natural reflex, I jumped up and jumped out of bed and ran to the living room, intending to escape the house. But oh my God, he had locked the door. I was extremely scared and couldn't help but beg. I beg you, please don't do this. I'm too young. Please spare me. I knelt down. I begged him. I begged him. My tears streamed down my face. I was so scared. Despite my heartbreaking pleas, the old man still came closer. He started to pull Lily's shirt and threw her hard on the ground. You can't escape me. Where are you going to run to now? If you're smart, serve me. But if you run, you're done for. Please, please forgive me. My mother and I have suffered so much. I'm still too young. I call you Dad. Please don't. If your mother can't please me, then you have to please me. If you don't please me, I'll kick you out. Get out of here. If you do anything to me, I'll call the police. My cries at this moment were just seasoning for his depraved desires. He grabbed me and pinned me down on the couch. His hands yanked my pajamas off and began his despicable actions. Because no matter how much I resisted, how much I struggled, I could not escape a hungry tiger with a body twice my size. He pressed me down hard, using his muscular hands to press hard on my neck so that I would no longer have the strength to resist. Now I could only give up. I could do nothing more when he was already doing that. I was in so much pain, both physically and mentally. I was an 18-year-old kid, never done it before, I had never been loved, and now I had to endure the scene of my own stepfather doing it to me. He was burying his head in to satisfy his craving, while I gritted my teeth to endure the burning pain. Because it was so painful, I pinched him really hard, but received a painful slap in return. His breathing became louder and louder, and my pain increased day by day. In a sudden thought, could doing adult things be this painful? I was so haunted, it was really heartbreaking. Tears and panic continued to fall. I didn't even know how long it would last and when he would stop. I had never been in so much pain, both physically and mentally. After about 10 minutes, he stopped. He sat down on the ground and said nothing. Perhaps he had satisfied his perverted nature. He walked towards Lily, picked up her shirt, and walked towards his bed, leaving me, a small, broken girl on Lily's rickety chair. When I woke up and looked down at it, I was even more frightened when I saw something red. For a naive child like me, that was a terrible thing. I thought that it was because of the injury to that part that it happened, but now I know that it was the injury of a precious gift. So I lost my innocence to a bastard uncle. I took the torn clothes from the floor and covered my ruined body. I couldn't sleep all night. I cried until I had no more tears. My whole life became blurry. I didn't know what to do, how to face the future. It haunted me for the rest of my life, and I probably would never be able to escape. I hated him. I just wanted him to disappear from this life. I couldn't look at him every day and worry that he would do something bad to me again. I was very hesitant about whether I should tell my mother or not, because I wouldn't be able to bear it if it continued like this. But if I told my mother, she wouldn't be able to bear it. She had to shoulder so many things. If I told her, the three of us would have no place to stay and wouldn't know where to go. I thought that after that one time he would stop. But no, the horse is used to the old road, and that despicable bloodlust never goes out. He still has the intention of raping me many more times. What was more painful was that whenever my mother was away, he used his strength to control me. I had to please him for the fourth time. What was even more bitter was that in April 2018, I discovered that I had strange symptoms, signs of pregnancy. Yes, I was pregnant, and the fetus was definitely his, that old bastard's. the man I had called Dad for so many years. I went to the doctor alone and found out that I was pregnant. The fetus had been developing for more than a month. When I found out, I was devastated. Everything almost collapsed. I didn't know who Lilia would share it with, and I didn't dare tell anyone. This was truly terrible news. If someone knew about this, I would probably live a life worse than death. The next day, I took a bus to Colorado and stayed at a cousin's house on my father's side. I lied to my mother that I was going to Arkansas to work. No one knew anything, not even that old man. I was afraid to face him, afraid that if I told him, my mother would not be able to handle the bad news, afraid of gossip and contempt. I was applying for a job at a coffee roasting facility in Colorado. Every day, the pregnancy grew bigger, and I still couldn't find my way. What should I do? How should I face reality? Please, can you give me some honest advice?